started. Welcome, everybody. Again, just for those who are just joining us, this is part 3 of EBRHA's Town Hall series, where we're going to have the opportunity to chat with Oakland mayoral candidate Barbara Lee. Very excited for this opportunity. We're going to run through just a couple of steps before we get started here. So just a reminder, the chat is disabled. If you have questions, please type them into the Q&A. It's a button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be filtering through the first come, first serve, first questions, and as they're answered throughout, we'll go ahead and move those. So thank you all so much for being here. Let's dive in. Actually, I'm sorry, while we're on this slide, I want to put up a poll. We want to get to know who is in the room with us today. So I'm going to put up a poll right now that you'll see in just a second as soon as I get my fingers together. There we go. All right. The first question asks, if you reside in Oakland.
Hey, can you hear me? This is Liz with Barbara Lee's staff. She'll be joining momentarily.
Yeah, I'm on,
okay?
Liz. I'm
oh,
on.
there you are.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I got in. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Liz. We're all set. Okay.
Thanks.
So question 1 on the poll for attendees. If you reside in Oakland, are you a renter, a homeowner / property owner, a rental property owner / manager, other or not applicable? And then question number 2 is, if you are a housing provider, what are you planning to do or hoping to do with your portfolio in Oakland in the near future? Are you looking to increase your portfolio and invest more? Would you like to keep your portfolio about the same? Or are you thinking about selling or exiting the market, divesting? And then if you put not applicable, Derek and I are just going to use our imagination. So we'll come up with something fun for you for your future there. So this, as soon as everybody participates, please, if you wouldn't mind answering this question, this will really help us gauge our questions and gear it more toward what you might want to hear. So I'll let this run for just a couple minutes. I'm going to share it with Barbara so that we can all see, and then we'll kick this off. So I'm just going to give it a couple minutes here. Thank you all again for joining us. I see quite a few guests here. If anybody has any questions about EBRHA, please feel free to reach out. We will put our contact information at the end, but I'm Danielle Baxter. I keep forgetting to introduce myself in these. I'm Danielle Baxter with EBRHA. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat with you. And then for all of our EBRHA members, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to hear your questions. Well, read your questions.
And Danielle, maybe you want to explain your title and role within EBRHA? So.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. So I am the sales and member relationship manager with EBRHA. So if you're interested in sponsoring an event, participating in an event, any questions about your membership or how it works, I'm here for you. And then I specialize in strategic partnerships. So if you're looking for a way to work with EBRHA or just do more with EBRHA or the community, reach out to me. All right, we've got a decent amount of participation here, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and then I'm going to share that with the panelists here and the group. So it looks like the majority of the people in the room are homeowners or property owners, about 44, well, not the majority, I guess, 44% of the people that answered the poll. We've got some rental property owners, managers, some renters, welcome, and then a lot of not applicables. So Derek, we'll have to think about that one.
Oh, I know who those are.
The second question is about your portfolio if you are a housing provider in Oakland. So we got 38%, 8 of the people said keep my portfolio about the same. 3 people answered they'd be interested in increasing their portfolio or investing more in Oakland, which is great. And then 10 people said not applicable, which maps out. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much for those who participated. I'm going to stop sharing that and we're going to go ahead and get started. So before we dive in, I do have a disclaimer that I'm required to read. So if you go to the next slide, please. Perfect. All right. So the information that you're about to hear is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. Please keep in mind that every situation is unique and the laws, rules, and regulations may have changed before, during, or after this webinar. Before acting, please be sure to obtain tax and/or legal advice from a licensed professional. The opinions and viewpoints expressed during this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of EBRHA or its members. And then just a reminder, we have more people joining. The chat is disabled. We will not be unmuting anybody. So if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A, the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And with that, next slide. Okay, I'd like to introduce some of the panelists today. Of course, I'm joined here by Derek Barnes, EBRHA CEO. We also have a special guest, our moderator today, Joshua Polston, who's been an EBRHA board member since 2017-ish. Featured candidate for today, our Oakland mayoral candidate for part 3 is Barbara Lee. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Derek and let everybody properly introduce themselves.
Great. Thanks, Danielle, for that handoff. And just because we have so many guests today that are not EBRHA members, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about East Bay Rental Housing Association. The association is a nonprofit trade association that's been around since 1939. We have about 1,500 members that own and operate about 60,000 rental units across the 2 counties that we do serve, which are Alameda County and Contra Costa County. And we say we proudly provide homes to almost 140,000 people across the 2 counties. Largely what we do for our members is provide information and services about housing law, legislation, compliance, things of that nature. First and foremost, it's an organization that is here to be a resource to our members to help them be compliant in providing rental housing, and that's safe, habitable, accessible housing. And we do have a number of events each year. And we also provide resources like forms and webinars and expertise around housing from time to time. And so we like to say that we, keep our members and people who are in this business educated and well informed. But that also includes our elected officials and our municipal partners as well. We have some great relationships at the local level as well as the state level. And I am so thrilled to have Congresswoman Barbara Lee helping us round out our town hall series. And what an amazing legacy and opportunity that we certainly have. And we are so excited to get started and diving in with you, because you've had such a long history in representing Oakland and doing good work at the national level, and here you are hopping in at the local level. And I think, I don't know if you remember this, when I caught you in the summertime, you were having dinner at a restaurant that we both like, and I think I asked you the question. I said, Rep Lee, are you jumping into this race? Are you thinking about running? And you answered as you should have at the time. But I think if you could take a few minutes and tell us more about yourself for those who may not know, which is kind of unbelievable in and of itself. About who you are and why you're running for mayor of Oakland.
Well, can you hear me?
We can.
Thanks so much. Let me just thank East Bay East Bay Rental Housing Association, as well as yourself, of course, Joshua, Derek, Danielle, everyone who's with us today, and also for what you do each and every day to not only help Oakland survive, but thrive. A couple of things just in terms of my background. I actually chaired the Housing and Land Use Committee when I was in the California Senate. Housing has always been, affordable housing has always been a big part of my agenda. When I was serving in Congress for 27 years, I served on the Financial Services Committee, on the subcommittee on housing and community opportunity. And then I went to the Appropriations Committee and used my ability at the national level in terms of funding for specific affordable housing efforts in Oakland. And so while I was a federal representative, I was constantly looking for opportunities for affordable housing for Oakland and for my district. I mean, that's just what I did. So yes, I was a federal rep, but I was very connected to what we do here in Oakland. And I know for a fact, yes, that Oakland is at a crossroads. But believe you me, I've spent my entire elected life looking for ways to provide access to stable, to safe, affordable housing, both for our landlords and our tenants, because property owners play a very important part in our housing market. And if I were elected mayor, and I'm working very hard to be your next mayor, I will bring the same leadership to the mayor's seat to ensure that our policies reflect fairness. And I think that's key when you talk with me and meet me, to know that I've always worked for fairness, for sustainability, and economic growth for all stakeholders. So just thank you all very much for giving me a chance to be with you, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you so much. And let's dig in a little bit more. So, Rep. Lee, as the mayor of Oakland, tell us about the 3 most critical priorities that you'd like to tackle first.
Sure, of course, the top priorities, and this is in every neighborhood, is public safety. And we have got to really understand it's got to be all hands on deck on public safety. Every neighborhood deserves and wants public safety. The voters in November passed Measure NN, which set forth a public safety strategy. And so top priority would be executing on Measure NN. And I understand all of the dynamics around public safety. Of course, 70% of our general fund is police and fire, and 30% for everything else. And I believe that we need to make sure that Measure NN accomplishes what it set forth, 700 additional police officers. But also, I think we need to get to 850. But realistically, that's not doable this year or next year. We have to know and be realistic and practical how we get to 850. And I believe that's very close to where the police department and we need to be in terms of full staffing. But having said that, Measure NN requires us to step up our efforts on crime prevention, and that is extremely key. Crime prevention and crime intervention. We need to free up police officers to be able to be community policing, to engage in community policing in their beats, because community policing for our small businesses and for our neighborhoods, for downtown, is essential in terms of public safety. Even though the crime rate is ticking down a bit, no one feels it, no one believes it. So public safety intersects with every other aspect of Oakland lives and businesses and organizations. And so we need to make sure that public safety, and I would insist that public safety and using Measure NN as our North Star be implemented as soon as possible.
Terrific. And then and are there other areas that you would tackle after? Seems like we have a lot of things, but you know, you're going to have to do a lot of different things all at once. And are there other areas that you would also want to focus on as well?
Sure. You know, housing affordability, making sure that we increase our revenue with regard to housing. And the budget, you know, overarching everything is the budget. But we must make sure that we stabilize and deal with the budget immediately as we address public safety. But housing, increasing housing supply and affordability is extremely important. And then transparency, trust in our city government, making sure that pay-to-play schemes and all of the code of ethics are such that we are engaged in a more transparent and accountable government. And I hope that you understand that trust and transparency and accountability is extremely important throughout all of our segments and throughout our entire city administration, including with the mayor and city council. But home ownership, addressing affordability, the cost of living here in Oakland is key. But again, going back to public safety, it all leads back to public safety if we're going to move forward in this city.
Thank you so much. And let's talk about some of the the economic growth areas and the investment areas. And I've heard you in multiple forums, as you know, and you're very passionate about bringing sort of the resources into Oakland. And you certainly have a history of doing that, and while the around us and nationally, the Bay Area, it seems like the economy has roared back from a life, something that no one could have ever imagined, the COVID pandemic. But it feels like Oakland is still closed for business. How do you explain this phenomena, and why is this still happening in our city?
A couple of things. One, we haven't recovered from COVID in terms of many of our policies. And I'm going to give you just one example relating to the budget. I brought in millions of dollars and targeted as an appropriator investments during COVID to save lives and livelihoods specifically for Oakland. Unfortunately, the budget, in terms of, you talk about a sustainable balanced budget, budgeted out based on this 1 or 2 time investments from the federal government. Okay, and so we have to get that under control. Our budget problems are structural. And if I were mayor, I would look at where the budget has exceeded what we, expenditures and revenue are key to balancing the budget. Where are we spending based on COVID investments? That should have never happened. And so we must get that under control. And I assume other cities did not budget out, because that is really part of the reason for our difficulties and challenges that we're having. Secondly, during COVID, some of our city staff were redirected from collecting revenue. And so I don't know how compared to other cities, but I know for a fact we did not collect the revenue. And we have to collect revenue. So it's revenue and expenditures. We have to get both under control. We also have not had an aggressive public-private partnerships strategy. And if I were mayor, immediately I would set up in the office of the mayor a team, public-private investments. And I've talked to many philanthropic organizations who care about housing, who care about Oakland, and also many companies, but they're waiting to determine the change in leadership. And if in fact we're going to address these issues head on, not necessarily who they are supporting, but it's just that they want to see how Oakland is going to move forward under a new mayor. And so I believe that as mayor, I would ensure that we, like other cities, are beating the bushes for private and public investments, and also making sure that we beef up our grants division, because we have lost a lot of resources for housing and for quality of life issues, healthcare, for crime prevention, because we did not apply for the money which I appropriated for Oakland. And so as mayor, I know this, and I know how to bring both sides together, landlords, tenants. I know how to bring people who, of course, endorse the recall, oppose the recall, bringing labor and business. I'm endorsed by the Oakland Chamber of Commerce and the labor unions. It's going to take a mayor who can bring different sectors together, not just to talk, but to find consensus on what we need to do to move forward, to increase our revenue and to increase our investment and to make life better for everyone in this city.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think you raised some really interesting points there too. And I think, one of the things that I've and others have been aware of too, Rep. Lee, is that there seems to be, I don't know, I don't want to call it an absent, and maybe it's just not known. And there doesn't seem to be an articulated sort of vision for the city of Oakland. And without having that vision for Oakland, it's really kind of hard to run, strategy or a good solid operating plan and a budget that reflects those values that we hold near and dear. And part of that vision has to include commerce in the city. And I think you've touched on this in earlier points, and your ability to bring money into the city, through the channels of government, which is very important, and I've heard you talk about this before, and having those relationships over the years in order to affect that. That is really super important. And also too, the public-private enterprise, that's a key piece of this. But I think we want to hear specifically in that, the bringing the dollars into the city. What specifically would you do you think is needed underneath the commerce component? Because it seems like we have challenges with small businesses. We have challenges not having enough of what we like to call our anchor business tenants, and these are the larger business because they seem to be leaving and moving. What's your answer to all of that, and what would you specifically do to address that?
We can't forget, Derek, that this is all related in large part to public safety. It intersects with public safety, bringing commerce and supporting our small businesses and ensuring that the climate is such that the big four and larger companies either will stay or site here in Oakland. And so getting the public safety piece under control is extremely important. Also, it's important that we have, because we know what the challenges are. We can't fix them overnight. But we can work on them, and we can show what our overall strategy is. A mayor is not a staff person. A mayor has to have the vision and the plan. And so it's important that that vision be articulated, but how we're going to achieve our short-term goals and our long-term goals. And so as mayor, I would beat the bushes. I mean, we need more money and more investments for crime prevention efforts. Now, as mayor, if we have a federal government left, and you know what is taking place in Washington, but whatever is left of the federal government and the Department of Justice and our community policing strategies, I will be there beating the bushes. I will be there calling people who I know very well. They want to help in Oakland. Our senators do. I've talked with them both, our member of Congress, our California delegation, and also Sacramento. We can't forget. And I'll share, Assembly Member Buffy Wicks, she's endorsed me. She chairs the Appropriations Committee. I would go to Assembly Member Wicks and say, look, can we early on look at how we can benefit in Oakland from our criminal justice and crime prevention and policing strategy? I would go to Senator Jesse Arreguín, who chairs the Public Safety Committee, who's endorsed me. I know him well. I would go to him and say, let's focus on Oakland. And I've talked about a regional public safety strategy, because you know that we have to work with other areas and other mayors and other sheriffs and DAs and police departments, because so much of what is taking place here in Oakland are coming from people who are coming into Oakland and leaving because of the Chase Posse. So we have to get that under control. And Assembly Member Mia Bonta, we have a lot of health issues here. She's endorsed me. So just a comprehensive approach to solving problems in Oakland is what I, as mayor, would begin on day 2. And that's extremely important. But public safety and having the trust of people, and I hope people know my record. And if they don't, I'm putting it out there and knowing that trust is important to me. And I hope I have worked to earn your support, but also know that I would carry that forward as mayor to do exactly what I say I'm doing. You can't, and I won't make promises, but I can tell you how I'm going to work each and every day to try to make life better through engaging in the leverage and in the influence that I have statewide and at the federal level.
That's super, super critical. I was just in Sacramento having these discussions with our legislators there. And I'll be in DC, in a couple of weeks, doing the same thing. And I think you're right. It's like there's going to be an ecosystem of folks that we have to bring together to help solve some of these huge issues in the city, but also sort of define opportunities for resourcing. One of the things too, I don't think it was the recent debates, but it may have been in another forum where there was some discussion about, there's always a discussion about wage gap in the city. And so this sort of also falls under commerce. But can you talk about that specifically, closing that gap, And at the same time, using your relationships to create opportunities, because I've heard you say that, in the past, like this, these things are all sort of tethered together, but at the same time, we have to understand that some of these issues that we are facing in the city of Oakland have to do with the access to resources and having good paying jobs in the city.
Yeah, and the wage gap is real. The cost of living is real here. The high cost of living, even though compared to other jurisdictions, some may be higher, some may be lower. But it's important for me, if I were mayor, to bring labor and business together to talk about how economically we can address this wage gap, because we want people to live in Oakland, and we want employees and small businesses and landlords and tenants to be able to stay here in Oakland and pay sales taxes and love our city and the glass half full, which is a beautiful city. So we'd have to bring labor and business together to address the wage gap and the cost of living, because nationally we know what's taking place and it impacts what's happening here in Oakland. But also it's important, Derek, to know that there are avenues right now that Oakland needs to tap. And I'm gonna give you one example for housing. Measure W was passed, it was in litigation. The county won the litigation. Soon, I believe this year, and I've talked with some of my supporters on the Board of Supervisors, the county's gonna get millions of dollars for affordable housing very soon. If I were mayor, I would demand a seat at the table, and I would demand Oakland get its fair share. That's looking ahead, because that is going to impact wages, it's going to impact housing, it's going to impact closing many of these gaps if we have the investments for affordable housing. And I know that's coming down the pike. And so Oakland's been missing in action in a lot of the resources that I could have leveraged. And as a member of Congress, I sent the money here and we didn't leverage it to actually get it, because of a city that has not been organized in a way with leadership to be able to do that. And so the wage gap, small business development, making sure our financial institutions understand that we are taking on the public safety challenge. We're fighting and working each and every day to do that. We're going to have to create an environment for commerce, an environment for workers, an environment where people go to the city and they can get a permit without waiting 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, expediting processes and making sure that accountability and transparency is integral in terms of city staff and city services.
Thank you so much. And I just want to remind our audience today, if you have questions, please place them into the Q&A area of Zoom. And just a reminder too about today's program. We're going to take some more time to have Rep. Lee answer the internal sort of questions that we have that were on the minds of many of our members, and then we'll flow into the Q&A, the questions from the audience from today. So I'm going to now turn it over to my co-pilot here, Joshua Rep. Lee, and he's going to spend a little time with you on housing policy in the rental market.
Great. Well, thank you, Derek. Much fun. And thank you, Rep. Lee, for joining us as well. And just so everyone also on the call is aware, the questions that we're running through, we have a list of questions that we've asked all three candidates that participated in our town halls, the same questions, to try to help tease out so you can make your most informed choice in terms of hearing their responses. So, and with that, I want to introduce myself very quickly. I am a board member, as Derek mentioned, and I'm also a small property owner housing provider here in the city. So I think I'm typical of perhaps many people who are members here of EBRHA. And I'll get into it. I have a couple questions that really focus in on, I think, a lot of the kind of the core issues that I think that many of our members are confronting. And so I'll just get to it. So the first one is, at 3.5 years, the city of Oakland had the longest running COVID eviction moratorium in the entire country. And so my question, I've asked this, as I mentioned, to all of the candidates, is what do you think is so unique about Oakland that justified such a heavy-handed policy?
Well, one is I sent federal dollars here for landlord protection. You know, we actually went back to the drawing board on some of our COVID recovery because we found that smaller landlords weren't really covered with our COVID relief. And so that's one thing that I think was important that we at the federal level did it. So here in Oakland, the 3.5 years, I would have to talk to council members to find out, but what I suspect is that there was not means tested, first of all, in terms of how the eviction policy was established, but also the fact that in Oakland, we have a higher rate, and I know the income level and the poverty rates, and people compared to other cities, the poverty rates are much higher here in Oakland. I assume that that was taken into consideration, but in fact, I think that we should be fair when it comes to landlords and tenants, and landlords should have been able to, and if they weren't, should have been able to weigh in as well as tenants on the eviction policies so that landlords and tenants would have not been affected negatively with the eviction policy.
Now, you mentioned means testing. Is that something that you're interested in implementing as mayor?
I would need to talk with landlords and tenants and see how that works and if that would make sense. But believe you me, what's important about myself, if I were mayor, before any policy was established, I would have everyone at the table with me so I could hear both sides and bring some kind of, and I think landlords would want this also, as well as tenants, some kind of resolve so that we don't get, so that we could move forward. And that would be the approach that I would take. Not only talking with tenants, not only talking with landlords, but talking with both together to try to find out what policies make sense for both.
Great. Well, thank you. The next question is really specific to Oakland. And, you know, here market rents are either flat or declining. And at the same time, operating costs are going through the roof, utilities, repairs, and also insurance, which many folks who can even get property insurance these days are seeing, you know, 200, 300% increases. So my question is, what changes to specific Oakland policies do you suggest to help keep the small rental providers here in the city operating and thriving and providing this crucial service?
Well, you're right. I think the city and again, given the budget crisis that we're talking about, we're going to have to determine how best to do this. But rental assistance, I think, programs to keep families housed that would go directly to landlords, I think is extremely important. And I would work to look at philanthropy, public and private partnerships to do that. Also, I think it's important to look at fair market value in terms of the rental market and adjust our policies accordingly and provide support for smaller landlords and for tenants. And I'm gonna give you one example. There was a housing development in Chinatown, and it was a senior development, and the seniors were gonna be evicted. And I had to bring the Secretary of HUD, and this is an example of public, how I think we need to look at this, to talk to the Secretary of HUD. I brought the Secretary out here to look at what was taking place in terms of fair market value of the rental income or the rental payments from HUD. I was able to get the fair market value rental formula changed to make sure that HUD had a formula that was fair for landlords. I got that changed. The tenants, these seniors were not evicted, and the landlord received the fair market value that the building was worth, and in HUD. And so I would look at how the city could help with fair market value at a time when we're in many respects in a very difficult time, and it's going to be even harder because we won't have HUD there to work with us. So I would definitely work to figure out how we would be able to do that, given the economic conditions that a lot of what is coming out of Washington, D.C. is going to make it even more difficult.
Great. Well, thank you. Next question is really about, once again, really focusing in on Oakland and some of the policies that have been implemented. And, you know, Oakland in many ways is really a test bed for many of the tenant protection elements, rent control, just cause, all kinds of rent increase caps. We have a very low cap right now of maximum 3%. So there's been a lot of policy and a lot of regulation in Oakland, yet rents here are still relatively high compared to other parts of the country and the region. So my question is kind of from a big picture policy, and you've had the benefit of having that big picture for many years. Do you think these policies help or hurt rental property growth and production to create more housing opportunities?
Well, I don't want to say whether they help or hurt, because they're tenants and property owners that we should help. And especially, for instance, supporting ADU development and rental conversion programs and incentives for affordable housing, and ensuring permitting processes are expedited. And I'm telling you, I think what I see missing here is that dichotomy between tenants and landlords, Joshua. And I would say, under Barbara Lee serving as mayor of Oakland, I would want, and I'm being very honest and sincere with you, to have the tenants and the landlords with me to kind of work through this, because I don't want a city where we can't have affordable rents. We have an unsheltered population. We have evictions that take place, but we also have landlords, especially the smaller landlords, who deserve to be able to not only survive but thrive. I mean, home equity, that's the pathway into the middle class, and by being able to provide affordable housing brings in income for a landlord, as well as housing for those who wouldn't have housing. So it's a dichotomy that you just laid out that I don't want to exist, and I would try, Lord knows I would try to help rectify that.
Okay. Let's see, the next question is once again focused on housing, but more on the production side. And what are your ideas or solutions to help increase the housing production and inventory here in Oakland, where, let's face it, it's a very expensive and restrictive market to build. So how can we, increase, kind of raise the level of the water in the harbor, so that all ships rise? How do we do that?
Well, I do know the permitting process and variances and all of the conversion programs, it takes too long. So I think we need to have a city staff that we make sure is accountable to just the projects that are online and in the queue for affordable housing. But also, we need to look at where there are vacancies in buildings and vacancies, and encourage landlords, and supported by the city, to convert, if possible, some of these vacancies into affordable housing. And I think the city has a responsibility, if a landlord wants to do that, to support that. And ADU development, as I said earlier, I believe that we need to make it easier for smaller landlords to, and through incentives and grants, which of course, given the budget deficit, how do we do that? Well, we're going to have partners that we can bring to the table, in Sacramento especially, to have these tax incentives and grants and other forms of fiscal mechanisms to help create a better environment for affordable housing. I brought in federal funds to get the transit village in Fruitvale started, looking at how we can use outside resources for Oakland to develop better affordable housing is extremely important. And I've done that through land trusts, through transit villages and other ways that create a win-win for everyone. And I would want to do that and would do that as mayor, but it's not going to be easy because we have to get commitments on all sides, and we have to get commitments for new and understand the cost of building. How do we reduce that cost so that there are incentives to build? And again, immediately Measure W, again, as what I would do immediately would make sure that Oakland gets its fair share of Measure W, because that's going to create a pathway for increased housing in Oakland. And to let that stay on the table and not get our fair share would be negligent and wouldn't be in Oakland's best interest.
Okay. So it's kind of shifting from housing to folks who don't have houses. And, you know, obviously there is a substantial homeless population in Oakland, and it's really grown from even before the pandemic. So the question is, what would your approach be as mayor to both remove unsafe encampments and find, you know, a healthy solution for this, you know, seem to be intractable problem here in the city?
Yeah, and it's a moral disgrace too. And first of all, our encampment policy we have, which is a good policy, but it hasn't been executed on. It has not been implemented. And I would want to implement the encampment policy right away. Secondly, and this relates back to the budget, code enforcement, only about, I believe it's 11% of the revenue from code enforcement as it relates to encampments has been generated and collected. And so we have to begin with code enforcement also for encampments. But next we need to make sure that we have a sustained system of transitional housing and permanent housing and getting people off of the streets as soon as possible. Our current policy is, of course, identifying those who've been living on the streets the longest to try to get them into mental health. A third are mentally challenged, a third drug addicted, a third life circumstances. And so we need better outreach, and we need better counseling and mental health services, but also on the front end, Joshua, because on the front end, and I know this for a fact because I've done a lot of work in this area, when you have a policy that and resources that won't allow you to go and try to get people off the streets within a week or two or three, it becomes home. And then once it's home, it's harder to get people. Everyone wants a home. Then a community comes, that's more people. Then an encampment develops. So we have to deal with on the front end also. And it's extremely important that our housing policy add that to this the strategy of a comprehensive strategy for homelessness. Also, we have to make sure that there's some areas, and again, when you look at the racial equity issue, you know, the majority of people who are on the streets are Black. Now, what are some of the underlying issues that cause this unfortunate dynamic to happen in Oakland? And we have, going back to the wage gap, and people who are living on the streets, some have jobs even. And so we have to deal with security, wages, and housing at the same time. And also, and I'm supporting pilot projects, because while that's not going to go, the funding would not go into the general fund or into the city overall budget. Places like, and I've looked at other jurisdictions, because this is a big issue, as you know. Here, everyone cares about what's taking place and wants the housing crisis addressed. In Portland, Oregon, for example, there's an initiative called Glitter, where people have been paid who are unsheltered to clean up the blight. And with those services, 70% of those people have found permanent shelter, but it was a continuum, and it's working there. So we need new ways of dealing with this here in Oakland. And I, as mayor, would want to enhance what we're doing now, enforce encampment policies, make sure that places like sensitive areas like schools, and I'm looking at Ascend and what neighbors did in that neighborhood, put up planters in an encampment where the encampments had to be removed. And so far, so good. But it took 2 years to get the permits and get what needed to happen out of the city. Why can't neighbors do something like that with city support immediately? But I'm trying to find out where people were, where are they now? Are they in transitional housing? And have we used all of the empty spaces and hotels and wherever for our unsheltered population? But it's got to be a sustained effort, and it's got to be comprehensive.
Great. Well, the idea of helping, homeless people take agency and even, employing them to have more agency in terms of, their own rehabilitation and I'll say having a job, all of the kind of pride that comes from that. That's an interesting proposal.
Well, Joshua, everyone
Mhm.
needs dignity. By profession, I have my MSW. I am a social worker, but I am a former business owner also. So I know the impact of unsheltered people living in communities and on the streets. And I also know the dignity that's required to help people move on with their lives. So, I would want a comprehensive strategy.
Sure. And, quick follow-up. You mentioned code enforcement for encampments, and just maybe if you could just clarify, is that code enforcement going out and clearing out camps, or in the debate there was some mention about code enforcement in terms of a revenue source? I'm just curious what.
Well, code violators have to, pay a fine, but we don't have the cameras that are necessary, the infrastructure to find people for dumping, for example, and around encampments. Okay. Yeah, for dumping. And that's part of the encampment policy and dumping. And that's extremely important.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. And I'm going to hand it back to Derek now. Thank you so much, because I know that we have a lot of questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to skip a couple of our canned questions so we can get to those Q&A a little sooner.
But I thank you, Joshua. But I want to come back to this. I just really want to make sure that there's a threading of this needle, because you're right, Congressman Lee, that when we see homeless, unhoused people on the street, and they often look like us. And I think and I've had conversations with the previous mayor's office about why that is, and there is a correlation, probably no surprise, to the numbers of Black residents in the city of Oakland, and how that has decreased over the last few decades, which thereby creates situations where we have lower home ownership. And there's a correlation to unhoused people that are in and of our community. And so we shouldn't be surprised, like the connection points of all these things. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about, some of the reasons why there are unhoused Black people on the streets of Oakland in greater proportion than any other ethnicity or racial group.
Yeah, Derek, and as a social worker, I'm trained to look at the whole and the intersection of public safety and race and economic insecurity and policing and how it all intersects with each other. And we can't just silo our policies or our follow-up in terms of enactment of policies without having a lens that includes the realistic variables in each of our policies, and we can't sweep any of that under the rug.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we didn't just sweep that casually, for our audience here, because there is a connection. And thank you for your insights on that. And then one other thing that you said earlier, and then we're going to move on to public safety. And this is just a throw out to you, which is, and when you're ready to have a conversation, because you hit on the P word early, which I always love, pilots. Like, sometimes we don't have to get out of the gate with the big thing. We need to look at some innovation in a smaller way and see where there's opportunity to do something, get something out of the gate with a finite number of resources and dollars to see what works. And so proposal for you when you're ready to have the conversation is that we have as part of our 2025 housing framework, have put together some ideas for bringing 500, because you mentioned vacant units, 500 vacant units back into the market for somewhere around $6 to $7 million. So
Really?
I throw that out there as an opportunity. I would love to talk to you more about that.
Yeah, and that's the point. I'm having a real voice in some of these policies and pilots. If in fact I were mayor, I would want to look at that and work with you on it. Also, finally, I'll just mention the added piece to this. We have about 400 veterans, I believe, on the street in Oakland. And I know this, again, my Washington experience bringing it home. I know because I worked on this to get the VA to be the responsible entity for housing unhoused veterans. Now, has the city contacted the VA? And are we working with the VA to target and do outreach to our unhoused veterans? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And so that's another piece that I, as mayor, would enact very quickly, knowing who's responsible for what, which government and which partners we need to work with.
Great, thank you. And public safety, because you talked a lot about this at the opening of our session here today. And when it comes to crime and lawlessness, and we know that it's still rampant across the city, although in some areas that has been decreasing. But for many people in the cities, in our city, feel like it's still an ongoing problem. How would you specifically address, in a demonstrable way, the conflict between greater public safety, right, and social and economic justice?
Yeah. Well, first of all, people need to feel safe, and whether Oakland is safe or not, it's the perception also, but we still haven't gotten to the point where people feel safe and that the crime rate has ticked down enough for people to believe it. And so greater police safety is important through a variety of ways. Police accountability has got to be part of our safety strategy. Secondly, community policing. I know for a fact that there are neighborhoods where the police, quite frankly, aren't well regarded. And so we need community policing, and we need a mayor who's going to go into the neighborhoods with the police to talk about what is taking place within the police department, given the shortage, given the overtime of the overtime. It's a budget issue also. And so greater police safety has got to be linked to police accountability and community policing. And also, we still have a federal monitor. There's still 3 or 4 tasks that are outstanding. Why is that? Because we haven't accomplished what the federal monitor believes we need to accomplish in terms of police accountability. I would want, and that's over $1 million a year. And so I would want to connect social justice and police accountability with our safety here by looking at what needs to happen within the police department so that this federal monitor can check us off. And that goes to the justice areas and to the police accountability, where there is an intersection between public safety and police accountability.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're going to pivot here to the budget and infrastructure and public services. And so, through the listening, and I was, because I was in Sacramento, I wasn't able to be with you all at the debates on Tuesday. But there are some things I'm looking at when I viewed the video that sort of stood out to me in I think we can all agree that there are parts of the city that are broken, that need repair. I think we can all, and there are leadership opportunities and gaps there. I think you addressed some issues, and so did Lauren Taylor about resourcing in the city. But there's one thing that it does get under my skin and probably others in the city, this narrative around Oakland being a low-resourced city. I don't buy it. I think that we do have a lot of resources. We do have a budget. We do have a budget that's, over $2 billion. So it's not like the money isn't there. I think what the candidates are just saying is like, it's our use or misuse of the dollars that are available. And Oakland has a larger budget than and revenue per capita than many other cities. So we got the resource. If we have the money here, how do you explain this idea of low service levels in the city, and I guess then the connection to how we are using and optimizing the resources that we do have?
Yeah. A couple of things on that. 70%, close to 70%, and it could be more, of our general fund is police and fire. Okay, that's a fact. It's police and fire, which can't be touched. That's a fact. When you look at how overtime, and then the overtime of the overtime is, we need to have more accountability and transparency in that 70%. For example, we need to make sure that we know exactly, and police officers are working overtime because we don't have enough police officers. And so overtime is needed. But there's overtime of that. We need to know what the benchmarks are, what that overtime of the overtime is, and what is taking place, and can, in fact, efficiencies within the police department be identified by administrative staff doing some of the administrative work that police officers are doing? And can we engage in technology to free up police officers to do the policing? Okay, so we have to take a look at that 70% of the general fund budget, which leaves 30%. And I would urge you to go to the city website and look at how the money, the investments in this $2 billion are divided up. Everything else is out of that 30%. And so we have to increase revenue and deal with our expenditures in a way that makes sense, because we need to have, in addition to this, I'll say, as mayor, I would ask for a forensic audit. We have an auditor who's done a good job. A lot of the audit reports and the suggestions haven't been implemented. But I believe we need a forensic audit where we can find the waste, fraud, and abuse in city departments. I am convinced that there are efficiencies that can be grabbed and put back into our budget. And the fact that I brought in these millions of dollars for COVID relief, and the budget is still based on the millions of dollars that I brought into Oakland, which is not good. You don't budget like that.
That's right.
And so, so that's it's structural in many respects. It didn't just start. And it goes back even further, 10, 15 years. So we have to look at the structural issues. Next, in the budget, we must look at how we collect revenue. And that's a big deal, and how we increase our revenue. And I know, some agree and some don't agree on a sales tax measure, but this measure that's coming on the ballot just puts us in par with other cities, increasing our sales tax. That's from 20 to 30 million. So we've got to look at a balanced approach, a comprehensive approach. And I've said over and over again that yes, everything is on the table if I were mayor, including cutting jobs, but that's the last resort, because you know what? Cutting salaries and jobs mean we're cutting services. And the public needs quality public city services, constituent services, core services. And by cutting staff, you're cutting services. So but it becomes a vicious cycle. Why can't I get my permits? Nobody's there to work because we cut those out. And now we're dealing with the neighborhood safety program and officers. That's been cut. Well, public safety is a priority. Is that the best cut to make when we need public safety in our neighborhoods and a police force that is not staffed properly. And so every bit of the budget is intersected with public safety. And so we have to look at the budget with our priorities in check, but also how we find efficiencies, how we raise revenue, and how we can bring in outside revenue to backfill some of what we need to do. Finally, I'll just say the grants writers and people who go out there looking for grants. Okay, I know for a fact, because I was the one appropriating the money coming to Oakland. We have not been aggressive in how we raise revenue from grants. And while that would be restrictive funding, it still frees up the budget. I appropriated money, and I was on the appropriations committee, the subcommittee on labor, health, human services, all of our domestic programs. And I was on the Department of Agriculture subcommittee. And I worked with Policy Links to develop the healthy food financing, which would bring in revenue for food deserts, for gardening, for schools. And I've called the city many times to say, I appropriated the money. Get ready to write a grant for this 20-some million. At least Oakland should be eligible for it, because I wrote it in a way where urban areas are eligible.
Heads up, right?
Yeah, heads up. So as mayor, it'd be a heads up. And I would have a team of grant writer staff, to not only just write the grants, but a heads up, know when the money's coming down. I would work with the legislators. I have those relationships. I have those contacts to say, okay, this is what Oakland needs. Are you all working on it? If not, can we help work on something? And can we make sure the criteria not only impacts or makes Oakland eligible, but other communities that look like Oakland? And of course, I would do that, and we need to do that. And that has an impact on our budget and an impact on the lives of people here in Oakland, because we would have additional revenue to do some of the things that we need to do to help Oakland thrive. You know, I might have to change to my phone because my battery's going down, but on this, so I might have to get off and go to another phone in a minute.
Sounds good. And so I just want to check in with my team. I know that I've seen questions kind of come in. We're going to move to that and get into rapid fire with Congresswoman Lee in just a second, where she's answering some of the questions from the attendees today. So team, let's get on the ready to fire up those questions. And then Rep. Lee, I'm going to go back to something that I heard in the debate, or maybe a previous forum. Would you support developing a system of performance evaluation for city staff throughout?
Yeah, absolutely. When people work and get paid, they should do their job, and there has to be performance evaluations, and accountability. And as a mayor, I would have my mayor's cabinet with department heads to make sure that that's happening. Having said that, also it's a hybrid form of governance here. It's not a strong mayor, but I say I'm going to write my own job description. So within the charter, I'm as strong of a mayor as I can be within our charter, and make sure that our city is functioning. I ran a business for 11 years. I know how to manage a manager, but that's not the job of a mayor. A mayor is the executor, but I would have my cabinet to make sure that people are doing their jobs, because city workers want to do their jobs. They just need to be managed, and they need to know who to report to. They need to know that they're being evaluated, and they need to know that we support them, and their attitude and morale should be such that they love their jobs and love serving the public. And that's what we have to do. And, also with certain policies that going back to any policy that's not working, we need to look at.
I'm glad you said that.
Any policy that's not working for the city, we need to look at. And I know there are a lot of policies, some have been implemented, some haven't been. But if the ones that haven't been, and if they don't make any sense, then we need to redo them, and if they do make sense, but not make sense for everyone, then we need to get people together, different sectors to do it. to
Thank you.
reevaluate it. Okay.
Thank you for that. And team, I think we're ready to get those rapid fire questions to Rep. Lee. Knock, knock.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Barbara Lee, for joining us. I've got some questions from the Q&A. I wanted to try to pull out some that you had already answered, so we'll try to get to some that hopefully you haven't covered yet. You talked about unifying stakeholders across Oakland. If this is your strategy for Oakland leadership, can you share some of your top department leaders, who they would be? Do you intend to keep the appointed staff from Chantal's administration?
This is, I'm trying to win this election. It's kind of premature, but
Yeah.
I do know, as a former business owner and a former person who understands, we have to have the best talent possible in this city, preferably homegrown, preferably Oakland residents, preferably people with experience with the city. But it's a bit early. I've got to win first to be able to talk about this.
Gotcha.
But I do know what the criteria would be.
You talked about kind of bringing people together that's still not, that were maybe Chantal supporters or other supporters. Can you talk a little bit more about how kind of bring Oakland together? It's so divided right now.
Yeah. Look, you have and I'll just give you an example. The Oakland Chamber of Commerce has endorsed me. They know me. They know I brought resources here, both from the state legislature and the federal government, to help create economic opportunity and jobs. So they endorse me, as well as the labor unions. The Central Labor Council endorsed me. That's just an extreme, quite frankly, example of what how I envision my work as mayor. When you look at the dredging of the port of Oakland, for example, which created enormous economic activity and good paying union jobs, I brought together, never would have been dredged had I not brought together the port, the environmental community, labor, and the business community to work through how we would dredge the port of Oakland to 50 feet. And we did that. And so identifying people at opposite ends of the poles, tenants and landlords, schools and the city, who may or may not agree, to help find ways to agree to solve problems. So it's not just bringing people together to talk. And I wanted to make sure you all understand that. I have a record of engaging in negotiations between stakeholders that generally are opposed to each other.
Interesting.
You talked a little bit about housing policies and re-examining them. How do you plan to work with the city council, working together with them when some of them might be for some of those policies and there might be disagreements? How do you plan to work together to help housing providers and renters?
Well, virtually every city council member has endorsed me, and I know them, and I want to work with them. I don't have to build or heal relationships, and they know me. And I would bring to them what I would want as mayor to be able to champion with the city council members. And having said that, I think I would, as mayor, work with city council members in their districts. So their priorities would be reflected in the mayor's priorities. And so this is a bottom up, if I were mayor, administration, where council members would hopefully agree beforehand, before the mayor would have to veto or be the vote to change a policy if the council were tied. I think it's important to try to bring consensus beforehand rather than after the fact, and working in their districts with and I don't know, I don't like a bunch of task forces, but maybe a working committee in each council district to look at what makes sense. I would handle my job as mayor in that fashion with our council members. And like I said, I don't have to repair relationships. I don't have to try to get to know them. I know them all, and they've all, virtually all of them have endorsed me. You know, and I might have to get to my phone now. I only have 5% left.
Right.
How many more questions do we have? Because I want to Huh?
We'll just go a few more minutes. Hopefully you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Do you need to switch
you want-
over, Rep.
you want to
Lee?
switch now? Or
Yeah, how much more time? Because I only have 5% left on my iPad.
I mean, we
so
got
I'm gonna-
plenty questions to go
But
to
I
the
have-
end. We got plenty of questions. We'll go to the end here, and then we'll have to cut it short when we run out of time.
Yeah, how much time is left on this? I thought it was an hour. That's why I got my
No,
iPad. What was it for?
If we can go for another 5 or 10 minutes, that would be great.
Okay, let's try, and then I'll get on my phone if
right.
it goes too far past.
We want to spend this time with you.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I have 3 or 4 things.
I understand. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
But I'm glad to be with you. But
I'll try and go as fast as I can. I mean, as you know, government is about people and a people business. You know, how do you think in that interaction with the community, do you think that the city employees should come back to City Hall and work 5-day weeks so they're there to interact with the people that go to City Hall and help them in person?
Yeah, and I'm glad that the city is doing that. I think they're back now, I believe 4 days a week. And I believe that a functioning city needs people in the office, and working with our labor unions and with the city staff. You know, you have to have a transition back because the culture of work has changed since COVID. And so making a timetable, a transition back is absolutely what needs to happen. And if in fact, the cost of living for people who live so far away can't, for instance, if families can't afford $2,900 to $3,000 a month for daycare, then I think the city needs to look at what incentives private sector can bring in and philanthropy to help support city workers coming back. And someone said to me, well, that's not our problem, but it may not be our problem, but I think to get a city to function well, if people are making 80, 90,000 and have 3 kids and have moved to Stockton, then in fact, to provide daycare, that may be an issue that the city would need to look at. But I absolutely think we need to have a functioning working city with city staff in place.
Great, thank you. Obviously, education is very important. You know, how do you plan to help achieve higher literacy rates at Oakland Unified and help the students be prepared for the job market?
Yeah, and remember now, schools aren't funded. They're funded through ADA, average daily attendance from the state, and our school population has dropped so rapidly that the schools don't have the funding that they deserve. City doesn't fund schools, but the city needs a partnership, a better partnership with the schools where we can augment and fill in some of those gaps. And I would work with our tech sector to bring in, which I did in Washington with federal legislation. I don't know how much of it was enacted here for tech, STEM education for students in our public schools. So augmenting the curriculum, working with our labor unions to get apprenticeship training programs, workforce training, and then making sure the families, so many kids are homeless. They're unsheltered on the streets. So everything, again, Derek, going back to everything leads to everything, public safety and making sure affordable housing is available for the families of these children, the city has a responsibility for. So coordinating with the city, trying to fill in the gap, with the school district, trying to fill in the gaps, and that partnership, which really doesn't exist, if you ask me, is something that I would enact immediately.
Excellent. Let's see. Can you be more specific and talk about housing, public-private partnerships and what that means to you?
Well, that means to me having you all at the table, having developers come, having tenant associations and homeowners associations coming to talk about our housing policies in Oakland and what we need to do. Do we need to update our housing initiatives and policies and how we bring revenue into the city? And that's going to involve maybe more tax and credits. It may involve what I've done with the East Bay Asian Affordable Housing Development Associations, or some of the housing groups that I've worked with. It may be looking at how we develop more land trusts, more transit villages, more co-housing. We have to look at housing as a collaboration with new forms of housing, because as we said earlier, the cost of living is still high here. So we've got to bring down the cost of building and the cost of living. and affordability for landlords and for tenants, and make sure that we have guidelines and resources available to create more affordable housing. But that's going to mean we have to look at tax incentives, grants, permitting, and incentives from outside and inside to do this together.
Chris, why don't we do one more question, and then I'll set the stage for a final comment from the Congresswoman.
Excellent. Oakland has agreed to sell its share of the Coliseum for $125 million. So many incoming incoming mayor would need to have a specific budget recommendations and amounts ready. Would your budget direct these funds to the general fund to prevent layoffs, or fund new programs? What do you think? Should these go to the general fund or go to specific items?
Well, first, I'm cautiously optimistic that this is going to happen. Secondly, I never would, had I been mayor, attached it to the budget. Thirdly, I think there are already plans on what would happen with the investments if in fact this deal is consummated, which I hope it is. And I would want to follow and look at it based on past decisions to see if those decisions are still viable and what that means, since it's been longer than expected. And I believe, though, that we need to, if we agree, the council and mayor and the community agreed on one strategy for the revenue, then we should adhere to it. But if it needs updating and if we need to revise that, then I would want to do that also.
All right, thank you very much.
Great. Well, listen, we're gonna leave you with the final word here, Congresswoman.
Oh,
such an honor to have you here and addressing our audience today. What words would you want to leave our audience? Why should they vote for you, and how are you distinguishing yourself from the other candidates?
Well, thank you again. I'll talk really fast. I hope I haven't talked too fast, but thanks for this engaging discussion. And I think myself, I hope my past has demonstrated how I will serve as mayor. And that is working in collaboration with people and organizations and sectors of our community, which oftentimes are in their own silos. And so I want to address these challenges that we face together. And I believe that there are many opportunities ahead, but we have to address the public safety crisis, and we have to engage in trust of elected officials, which means ethics issues that we have to stop, and the ethics issues that we have to tighten up. No more pay to play, but also you have to have a mayor you can trust. And I hope that my record, and that you believe that I have worked for Oakland, and know that if I were mayor, I would definitely be hands-on and would work collaboratively with the leverage that I have from everywhere to focus on making Oakland better for a city where not only we're here to survive, but to thrive. And that includes the East Bay Rental Housing Association and all of you to help me make this a better city. So did we make it?
I think we made it. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, thank you so much for being so gracious today with your time. It was great to have this chat with you. We'll be in contact with your team, and thank you so much.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you very much. Really great to be with you. And I hope you'll vote for me.
Take good care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
And we're going to close it out here with some final closing comments here from Chris and the team. And so take it away, Chris.
Yeah, just wanted to remind folks about some upcoming events we've got. We've got our monthly roundtable next week. We've got a full list next week on Tuesday, March 18th, with Wayne Rowland, our board president. We'll answer questions and talk about things that are happening within the rental market. Getting the most out of your technology with IntelliRent webinar on Wednesday, the 19th. And then prepare yourself for a potential audit with Balanced Asset Solutions on Thursday, March 20th. So we got 3 days in a row of some great events to help educate you, answer questions that help you with the your rental housing industry. So thank you again for joining us today. And then I want to remind everyone, we've got our Housing Innovation and Technology Conference, Saturday, May 8th. Registration is now open. this is a great event. Speaking of technology, of how technology can help you with your rental property, save time, save money, and really help you communicate with your renters using technology as well. So this is a great event at the Lafayette Veterans Memorial Center on May 3rd. So register now. We've got promotion. Register before the end of March, and you get a complimentary lunch at the event. So don't wait. Register now and get your free lunch. And thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, free lunch. We're motivated by food here.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone. Thanks to my amazing team, always punching above their weight here, making events like this successful and bringing them to our community. And thank you to our members who joined us today, and thank you to all the guests. And we will see you around these parts soon. And thank you, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, for joining us today, and her team for helping us pull this off. Have a wonderful day, and I guess see you all after April 15th.
Thanks, Derek.
See ya. Bye-bye.